Welcome back to The Income Generation, the show where we share valuable financial information for that period in life when you're either in or approaching retirement. If you've been watching our recent shows, you know we've been talking a lot about the 7 core values that I believe you need in order to be a good, successful investor. These are the same values that I outline in my book called Return on Principle, which comes out later this summer. But the value we're going to be talking about today is a little different because in a way, it's your reward for focusing on the other 6. If you focus on overprotection, honesty, diligence, detail orientation, all the other values I recommend, then this final value should arise as the net result of your efforts. What I'm talking about today is being fearless with your retirement goals. Now, I want to be very clear about what I mean by being fearless because it's not a word you want to misinterpret when it comes to saving and investing. I definitely don't mean recklessness. In fact, the kind of fearlessness that I'm discussing is the exact opposite of recklessness. For example, jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, or even with a parachute that you're not 100% confident in, is reckless. However, jumping out of an airplane with a parachute that you're certain is packed properly and fully functional, and of course with the right training, is fearless. Why? Because your confidence, your certainty in the strength and integrity of your safety measures allows you to make that jump without fear. And where did that confidence come from? Well, it came from focusing on overprotection. Because you certainly do not want to cut safety corners or just do the bare minimums when your life's at stake, which is obviously when you're jumping out of an airplane. It also came from diligence and detail orientation while packing your parachute. It probably came from being coachable and fully open to the teachings of your jump instructor. And it probably came from honesty in deciding whether you were really the person best qualified to pack the chute in the first place, or whether you wanted the help of an experienced expert. In other words, your fearlessness was a value you achieved by embracing and applying the 6 other important core values. And that's the kind of fearlessness that I'm talking about today, the ability to live your life and pursue your dreams without being handicapped by fear, and without having to settle for reckless choices because you don't realize that there are better options. So then, how does all that apply to saving and investing for retirement? Well, think about it for a moment. What do most people want, generally speaking, from their investments? The simple answer is they want maximum return with minimum risk. Virtually everyone wants the same thing. But knowing that isn't quite enough. You have to go deeper and say, I want maximum return for what purpose? Is it for an eventual lump sum purchase, like a boat or a new summer home? Is it to be used as an inheritance vehicle for your children or grandchildren? Or is it to generate reliable, consistent retirement income? I've talked on previous shows about the difference between performance-based and purpose-based investing. For example, performance-based investors are those interested in getting the maximum returns on investment regardless of how much return they need to hit their personal goals. Those are folks that oftentimes look at investing almost as being a contact sport, where the objective is to beat the other guy, almost for bragging rights, if you will. Most people, however, identify their goals as being more purpose-based, meaning that they have specific retirement objectives in mind. And usually, the number 1 item on that list is to have sufficient income to enjoy retirement comfortably and to feel reasonably confident that you're never going to run out of that income or money. In fact, a survey conducted just 2 years ago revealed that among baby boomers, a majority said they actually feared running out of income during retirement more than they feared death. Now that may sound a bit surprising at first, but it's really understandable when you think about it. We all have a certain sense of inevitability about death, but retirement is something we know is open to a lot of possibilities. It could be a time of security and enjoyment, or a time of worry and just scraping by. The good news is, as you'll learn on today's show, is that you have a tremendous amount of control over which of those scenarios defines your retirement years. And this applies to you whether you're preparing for retirement or you're already retired. It all starts with taking control and understanding that you simply cannot achieve fearlessness by leaving your financial future entirely in the hands of fate or under the control of someone that you're not 100% sure about. The other important thing you learn on today's show is that eliminating that specific fear of running out of income from your retirement planning is mostly a matter of making income your primary strategic focus. Not portfolio growth or capital gains or diversification, income. Reliable, steady income from your investments designed to last throughout your retirement and beyond, even if that means 30 years or more. All the core values that I've talked about are ingrained in the income-based investment model, and frankly, they're the key to achieving your fearless retirement. In fact, that's why we call this show the Income Generation. I'll talk more about that next on today's Market Breakdown. Then later in the show, we'll have our special guest with us. And after that, Morgan and I will get into some very specific and helpful details about various fixed income strategies. So stick around, we'll be right back. This is fun, this is great. 3, 2, 1. But I'd like to take a few seconds and tell you why I decided to write the book entitled Return on Principal. Basically, it all boils down to this. Let's face it, you deserve to live a happy retirement. It's as simple as that. But for many, the subject of money, finance, and math is complicated. Here's a fun fact. Many Americans claim that they'd much rather clean a toilet than calculate a tip in a restaurant. Thank you, I guess. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. Using the 7 core values I outline in my book, you too will be able to build a life based upon the right core principles. Cut. Return on Principal isn't just a book about financial investing, it's about investing in your life. I know for a fact that you're going to love it. Okay, now it's just getting a little weird here. Take a moment and ask yourself, what causes fear? Well, a psychologist could probably give you a very long, complicated answer to that question. But in my experience, I find that most likely it's boiled down to a couple of interrelated things: the unknown and lack of control. With that in mind, what you're going to learn on today's Market Breakdown are some details about why and how investing for income helps eliminate, as much as possible, the main causes of financial fear from retirement planning and ultimately from your retirement itself. Let's start by focusing on why the strategy incorporates the core values for protecting your money and also leads to fearlessness. The simple explanation is that it has to. It simply cannot work any other way. The more involved answer begins with what I talked about just a few minutes ago, identifying your purpose-based investment goals. If you're retired or within 10 years of retirement, and you identify your number one investment goal as dependable retirement income, then good for you. In fact, in my experience, you're on the right track, and you're not alone. The vast majority of retirees and near retirees have that same priority, whether they realize it or not. They understand it's important as retirement approaches to make a paradigm shift from a growth mindset to an income mindset. A growth mindset, or one which I often refer to as the 401k mindset, is the one you have during the accumulation stage of your career. It's the one where you get your statement in the mail every month, you look at it, and you focus on the lump sum value. If it happens to be up, you're happy. If it's down, you're down, and maybe even a bit worried. That simply is not the right mindset for a fearless retirement. So your priorities need to change as you approach retirement. I always say that the priority list you should adopt as retirement approaches is actually the reverse version of the one you had during most of your working years. In other words, growth first, safety second, and income third should, as you approach retirement, ultimately become income first, safety second, and growth third, in that order. So now let's look at that list in relation to the core values that I've discussed. As you might recall, the first value I stress is overprotection, or we call financial defense, which would seem to relate primarily to the second priority, which is safety. But this actually gets to the heart of what many people don't realize or understand about an income-based investment model. So let me clarify. The reality is that with fixed income strategies, safety is a natural and necessary component of your plan. If you make income your number one priority, then you have to focus on strategies that protect and grow your principal. Why? Because your principal is the primary source of your income now or in the future. Now that formula doesn't necessarily apply to the old priority list, the priority list which you had during the accumulation phase of your career. In other words, you don't need safety if your primary objective is growth. In fact, as I pointed out many times on this show, safety is usually the first thing that you sacrifice if your priority is growth. Prioritizing growth usually means focusing on capital gains, and that means having a large percentage of your investments in stock and mutual fund-based investments. As we've seen with two major stock market crashes so far in the last 16 years, investing for growth can sometimes lead to shrinkage. By definition, the stock market is filled with unknowns and lack of control. Those elements are inherent in the stock market, which I sometimes refer to as the world's biggest casino. It's really no different from betting on a football game or horse race, where you have absolutely no power over determining the outcome. Think about it for a minute. You could do a detailed analysis of a company and feel confident that it's financially sound, but then it falls out of favor with Wall Street and a sell-off occurs. You can still lose your bet. You see, you can't control the emotions of other investors. It could be a great money-making company, but it's still subject to the fickle whims of Wall Street, and so is your money. In addition to the risk factor, there are other major drawbacks to being heavily invested in the market when you're retired or within 10 years of retirement. For example, your income can change when dividend rates change. A lot of companies, in fact, lowered their stock dividends back in 2008, 2009 during the financial crisis. Investors with a lot of stock exposure saw these changes reflected in their statements in the form of decreased income. The point is that all of this has to change when you make income your top priority. Why? Because the first thing that you have to do to ensure success is to protect, or actually overprotect, your primary income source. If you're really going to put your portfolio to work for you, then you have to focus on strategies that give you control and that eliminate as much as possible these unknown factors. Here's an example that I've discussed before. An advisor with a stock-based business model might put you into bond mutual funds, whereas one specializing in fixed income might more likely suggest an actively managed portfolio of individual bonds. Why? Because that second option gives you more control and fewer unknowns. Even if an individual bond, or let's say the overall bond market for that matter, falls out of favor and drops in value, your income doesn't change when you're in individual bonds. Why? Because the interest payment is fixed. Plus, you know that the face amount is ultimately guaranteed to be repaid at maturity by the issuer. In other words, you decide if any loss you incur with individual bonds is a paper loss or a permanent loss. And it's only a permanent loss if you decide to sell it when it's down in value, or of course in the case of default. This is simply not so with bond mutual funds. These cannot be held to maturity, therefore making any loss an actual loss. This is why investing for income is the one strategy that incorporates all the core values and ultimately leads to fearlessness during retirement. In fact, mathematically speaking, it has to. Its very foundation is based on eliminating unknowns and granting control. The universe of conservative fixed income-based strategies includes things like certificates of deposit, government bonds, fixed annuities, municipal bonds, corporate bonds, index annuities, preferred stocks, and non-publicly traded REITs. And I'll be talking more about each of these with Morgan just a bit later in this show. Some of these investment vehicles are insured by a governmental fund or authority and therefore have minimal risk of loss if held to maturity. Others have some risk of loss but are all generally considered to have less risk than the overall stock market. Regardless, all are designed to generate income through interest or dividends. Therefore, the potential effects of any loss are offset to a large degree by the steady, dependable income which they generate. In fact, that's the real beauty of fixed income investments. With most, the dollar amount of the dividend or interest generated is fixed and doesn't change, just as the name suggests. So, even if the value of an investment drops temporarily, your income or cash flow doesn't. not just the percentage of your income, but the actual dollar amount of your income. So if your goal, your top priority is income, not growth or a lump sum purchase, this strategy is uniquely designed to help you achieve your goal. You no longer even have to look at the lump sum column on your statement as you did back when you had what I call the 401k mindset. You don't have to get depressed or worried if your principal is temporarily down, because that doesn't affect your income. Oh, and by the way, because most of these investments have a par value, their face value tends to remain sticky around that par value, which means that they aren't likely to decrease nearly as much as stocks or mutual funds when things go badly. Oh, and by the way, again, if you're not retired yet and you're using the income to reinvest, then you could take advantage of that fixed income securities drop in value to buy even more shares for even a better growth rate on your future income. In fact, you may have heard me describe investing for income before as the bird in the hand approach to retirement savings. Obviously, that's based upon the old saying that a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Think about how that relates to those two main causes of fear, the unknown and lack of control. With a bird in the hand, you know you've got it, and you know that you're in control. That's why investing for income is truly the bird in the hand approach. That's why and how it's the single strategy uniquely designed to let you pursue your goals and to enjoy your retirement with absolute fearlessness. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. Our next guest is quite an inspiration and a model of fearlessness. 26 years ago, at the age of 24, Hector Picard was working as an electrician on a substation transformer. He was electrocuted not once, but twice with 13,000 volts. The first time went through his right arm and out of his right foot. The second hit was in his left arm, and it went out of his left hip. He suffered second and third degree burns over 40% of his body and lost all of his right arm and half his left. At the hospital, they induced a coma for 4 weeks. When they brought him out of the coma, he found that they had removed his right arm and half his left. Rather than feeling sorry for himself over the unexpected loss in his life, he set on a new course. Today, Hector is a triathlete, a distant cyclist, a motivational speaker, father, husband, and businessman. Most importantly, he urges people to be inspired and to go out there and live, to figure out their challenges, to make modifications, and to challenge themselves. No excuses, don't stop living is Hector's slogan. I'm humbled to be here with today's guest, Hector Picard. Hector, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, David.
Tell us about your story and how this initially happened 26 years ago.
Yeah, like you mentioned before, I'm working at the end of the day, I'm working as a substation electrician apprentice. And my job was to remove some equipment from the deactivated transformer. So that was transformer number 2. So I walked in between two of them. The one on the right was on, the one on the left was off. I made a right turn. As I climbed up this 2-story structure, made contact, and 13,000 volts went through my right arm, down my side, blew out the top part of my foot. And on the way down, I must have grabbed again because I hit it again with my left, and it went out my hip, and I don't remember any of it. This was actually told to me. They heard 2 explosions, and I was on fire, and next thing you know, I'm waking up 30 days later from a coma.
And 30 days just gone. Wow. Yeah. Hey, I can, as you know, I can kind of relate. I lost my dad when I was 3 years old to a similar accident. He was electrocuted at work, and as it turned out, he was on a construction rig, and just there was no getting off when it happened. Interestingly, though, when I talk to you about your story, it's amazing. And I think about all those pictures I see of people doing triathlons and how they first dive into the water, and there's people kicking, swimming over other people, hitting other people. Yeah, how do you do it?
Very carefully.
Yeah.
At first, it was like, all right, let me see if I could go up front with everybody. No, there's no chance of it. So I learned to stay either towards the back or to the side and try to avoid contact. You waste so much time with contact, and then there's always the fear of drowning. I don't want to drown. So two very important issues. But I learned how to swim on my back just using my legs, and it's one of my favorite parts of the triathlon.
Mm. Yeah, swimming on your back. That was because I was always curious as to how you actually did that. I have a tough enough time swimming a distance with 2 arms and 2 legs. I can only imagine the challenge.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. But I put it out there. The first time I tried one, I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this done. And I just got hooked to the sport, and I turned it into a career. And I mean, I love it. I love the sport.
And now you started an organization called Don'tStopLiving.org. Which is wonderful, which I think is a great slogan. And it's a great slogan also for retirees, for our viewers, because the reality of it is that a lot of people go into retirement with fear. And if you think about, what Hector has been able to overcome here, if you're able to do that without fear, then clearly our viewers going to retirement should be motivated to do the same. How did you initially overcome that fear?
I've always been hard-headed. When somebody told me you can't do something, no, I set off to do it. The fear was always there, especially, having no arms, riding a bike and going 20, 30 miles per hour, there's a lot of fear involved. But being prepared and working hard and training myself, I get over the fear and just concentrate on the goal, which is what we all do these things for.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, you must have had some difficult times early on. When you first woke up out of a coma after 30 days, as you said, did you find yourself depressed? Did you find yourself angry? Did you find yourself, praying to God, why me? Why this happened to me? Blaming?
All the above. Definitely, I didn't know what my future was going to be like. All I did was concentrate on my 1-year-old and said, all right, I'm alive. I got a second chance at life. What am I going to do with it? And I wanted to be a father to her and a husband to my wife and move on. Yes, I have no arms, but I'll figure it out. The rest of me is still working fine.
Absolutely. Do you find yourself angry at any point, even for the doctors? Angry that, gee, couldn't you have saved my arms? Couldn't you have done anything like that?
I've always been a problem solver, and when the accident happened and I'm conscious of what's going on, I'm thinking, well, they could have done this, could have done that, but no. They had to do what had to be done to save my life.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. I love the courage because, again, it's a lot of people, as our viewers know, some of them, some of you, when you get close to retirement, if you feel like, gee, I want to retire at a certain age and I can't, and you have not quite enough money for retirement, and then you start the blame game. Maybe it's a broker where an investment went wrong and the anger comes in. And here's a great example right in you, Hector, that shows instead of the blame game, instead of anger, how to say, how do I turn lemons into lemonade? How do I do this? How do I move on with my life? And again, I'm humbled to be here with you today. We're going to take a big commercial break just now, and we'll be back in just a minute. And stay with us because I want to ask Hector some more difficult questions about how he overcome the fear and other limiting beliefs. We'll be right back after the break.
Read David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, Return on Principle, 7 core values to help protect your money in good times and bad. Discover practical solutions to the financial challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. David Scranton's approach to financial planning is a holistic system designed for maximum protection, strategic growth, and reliable income regardless of market conditions. Available now.
Now, a lot of retirees become depressed because, as I mentioned right before the break, you get close to retirement. Maybe you're not exactly sure how you're going to retire or if you have enough to retirement. And Hector, I'd have to guess that you went through some of that depression too early on. Yeah, how did you overcome that aspect of it?
I'm all about thinking about the positives. I don't dwell too much on the negative parts, and you know, being like this, I couldn't dwell on it, or else I wouldn't be able to live my life to the fullest. So I just concentrate on the positives and little steps and little successes here and there, and it just got me to where I'm at now.
Mm-hmm. Now, there must have been some setbacks along the way, whether either you start off on the ramp to recovery, and then either you allowed fear to creep back in, or maybe some kind of depression or concern. You know, tell us about that, if you can perhaps recall one of those stories when you had such a setback, and how you handle that, because I know these things can go in waves, and you have good times and bad times like anything else.
Well, I like to refer to the most traumatic moment in my life. It wasn't the accident. It was almost 20 years later that my ex-wife, or at the time was my wife, decided to do the wrong thing. And I had one choice, you know, do I stick with it? Do I deal with it? And well, she continued doing it, and I figured, you know, all right, she doesn't want to be with me. So I had to move on from that and go out in the dating scene, and it led me to the sport of triathlon and all these great things that came about this really tough moment. And I could have taken there were only two choices: either live or just let it beat me down. And I wasn't going to let that happen.
Yeah, and that was a setback. I mean, if you had overcome the setback when you were 24 years old, you know, the setback of that you experienced with your ex-wife, as difficult as it might have been, the reality of it is at least that's a setback that you were in good company, as 50% of the population or more had incurred that. Now, you started this organization, Don'tStopLiving.org, and how long ago was that you started that?
Well, I use it as a vehicle to bring attention to the causes I raise money for. And I started that in 2009. My brother said, "Hey, here's a great name for your website." I go, "All right, sounds great. That's my motto. That's what I believe in. You know, I'm not going to stop living. I'm going to live it to the fullest." And you know, it just creates attention. And what I do is I raise money for children's charities, and but I use that as a vehicle to attract attention. Every time I ride a bike, I attract attention. Why not, you know, divert it and push it in the direction of the kids?
I also do some motivational speaking. You know, what kind of groups have you spoken in front of, you know, that where you've been able to influence them positively in the past with your own life experiences?
Well, I speak at a lot of corporate events. Novation Settlement Solutions, which is one of my sponsors, I must have wowed them because they said, "We want you as our spokesperson." So I've done events for different corporations. I've even done it for pool companies. I've done it. Schools are the ones that bring me the most joy, because to see these kids' eyes, you know, wide open, listening to my story, it just makes it all worthwhile. But definitely lots of corporate events. I've traveled. I just got back from the city of Pasadena last month, and I did a presentation for them. So, you know, my story is relatable. Like you mentioned, we've gone through divorce, the dating, the financial issues, the children. I'm actually a grandfather of 3. I got a whole ball of issues there. But it's a wonderful, it's life, and I'm enjoying it.
And you can hold your grandchildren, right?
Yes, correct.
That's great. That's great.
A little shaky, but I can hold them.
That's okay. That's all that matters. Yeah. And Don'tStopLiving.org is a nonprofit organization?
No, it's a corporation, and like I mentioned, I use it just to attract attention. But all the monies, anything that's donated, goes directly to the charity that I'm raising money for.
So it functions as a nonprofit, basically. Yeah. So can you take a minute? Can you tell our viewers then how they can contribute to Don'tStopLiving.org, whether it's financially or even in other ways?
Well, with in this case, I'm raising money for Broward Children's Center. So bcckids.org is the organization I'm raising money for this year.
Okay, great. Now you also have something special that you're doing in terms of sponsoring a race coming up in the short term. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, so this year I'm doing 25 triathlons, and each one of those races is dedicated to a child from the Broward Children's Center. And these are children with their disability levels are so, I mean, it's tough to, the lives they're going to have to live through and the challenges they're going to face are incredible. But I'm dedicating each race to a different child, and I get my medals, and later on we do a medal ceremony where I give those medals to the children. So
that's great.
Just to see them happy with a medal is incredible.
So clearly we're talking today about being fearless in retirement. I somehow can imagine that your retirement, whatever that means for you, because today with boomers and so on, retirement means different things. It's not the old model where you retire and play golf every day. But somehow I think retirement is not going to slow you down or scare you much at all after what you've been through.
I don't think so. Every time I'm in a race and I see somebody pass me by with a 7-1 or 7-2 on the back of their leg, and I'm only 50, wow, there's a lot of hope.
That's right. That's right. I ran one marathon in my life, just one, and I remember I crossed the finish line with a fellow that was in his 70s. He actually tied my score, and I'm not sure whether that's because he actually ran a good time or I just ran a bad time. But nonetheless, in closing, what words of wisdom would you bestow upon our viewers when they're starting to feel a little bit of fear when it comes to retirement, just feeling a little uncertainty as to how they can go about to living that retirement that they've always wanted? How would you advise them to overcome those fears and to put it out there and to focus on the positive, as you've done consistently through the last 26 years?
In my case, it's my goal is to be happy, and whatever it is, I choose to compete in triathlons. Others may want to read books. The goal is to go after happiness, overcome those obstacles that try to stop you from reaching them, whether it's to go through them, over them, or around them. Just get to it and be happy. You know, just find happiness.
That's great. You know, it's interesting. I hate to even say this to you, but after my dad was killed at work, I actually had a lot of people since then who said to me, well, you know, this is for the better because he never would have been the same. And I always thought those people were wrong. After having met you, I know they're wrong. So it's been a pleasure. It's great having you on the show.
Thank you, David.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with Morgan to talk more about fearlessness and how fearlessness can relate to your retirement. We'll be right back. If you're not using someone who's well trained in fixed income and you're born before 1966, it may just be time for you to break up with that advisor and move on. I would suggest someone who will care for you through these important years of your life. If you need help finding someone, call or write us. I'd also like to remind you of the special report entitled The Income Generation. This is available free to you, our loyal viewers, online. If you haven't downloaded your report, pick it up after the show. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation. Again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation.
Another great topic, David, and I really like how you define the difference between fearlessness and recklessness.
You know, people tend to admire the quality which we call courageousness. So I think when you think of fearless, you could think of courageous. It's a good quality, providing you set yourself up in the right way so that you can afford to be fearless without being reckless.
Absolutely. Your point is that fearlessness is something you earn in a way. You put it in the work and effort so you don't have to be limited or held back by fear. Kind of like piloting an aircraft or speaking in public. You really have to put in the work.
That's right. That's right. And the first step toward that is really focusing first and foremost on overprotection when it comes to your money. Okay. Because at the end of the day, you really have no business being fearless if you go into retirement and could lose half your money or more. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not the working years anymore where you can always afford to go back to work and earn it back. I always ask retirees, gee, if this goes wrong, are you willing to go back to work? And I usually get this very strange look. You know,
That's terrifying.
That's right. You know what the answer is. That's right.
Yes. No, thank you. So in terms of using fixed income to achieve a fearless retirement, you've pointed out that reducing risk is just the first step.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. The second step, and even in some ways more important than reducing risk, is having enough income being generated from your investments so that even if that investment drops in value, you know that the dollar amount of your income is not going to change. Again, not the percentage of income, but the dollar amount of your income won't change. And it makes it a lot easier to see a statement that has a reduced lump sum value from one month to the other if you know that it doesn't affect your income and lifestyle.
Absolutely. And we've shared a lot of tips on how to do that based on the 7 core values for protecting your money in good times and bad. Now, these are also in your book coming out soon.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thank you for pitching my book. I really appreciate it.
I can't wait to see it.
That's right. and you know, the core values are important not just for you, but they're also important for your advisor. Remember, advisors are just human beings. They're like doctors. Different people have different specialties. And even those that might have the specialty of income generation, it doesn't necessarily mean that they possess these core values. I find that, you know, over 80% of all investment advisors don't really possess these core values. In other words, they've taken this on as a career, but they don't really possess them themselves. So they have the outside game, all the external knowledge, but they don't own the inside game.
So choose wisely when it comes to your investment advisor and also your investments.
Absolutely, yes.
So with that in mind, let's talk more about some of the income generating strategies that you've identified briefly in today's market breakdown. Now, I know you present those as a group and you lay them out in the form of a teeter-totter.
Yes.
So let's kind of show that visual and have you explain it.
Great. And the teeter-totter is just that. It's a visual that really shows the 3 different major categories of investments. On the right, you have things that are insured.
Okay.
And insured things mean basically that they are insured by government fund or governmental authority. They theoretically at least have no default risk.
Okay.
On the other side, on the right side, are things that people invest in for growth. These are during the accumulation years when you're not worried about safety or income, you want growth.
Okay.
Things like stocks, things like mutual funds, even speculative real estate. Again, things that you invest in for growth, not income, but when you invest for growth, sometimes it goes the other way and you end up with shrinkage instead.
So is it fair to say the teeter-totter is really referring to your risk?
It's referring to your risk.
Potential risk.
Because you have the things on the left that are insured, the things on the right, which most people are familiar with during those accumulation years of their career, and then the things in the middle, which are generally considered to be a lot safer than the things on the right, than the stock market and growth real estate and so on and so forth, but are considered to not be quite as safe as the things on the left. In other words, they're not insured by governmental fund or governmental authority. And regardless, the things on the left, the things in the middle have really an additional thing in common. And that is they're all designed to provide steady income, steady cash flow to a retiree or someone within 10 years of retirement.
Oh, I know we like the sound of that. I think it would be very helpful to our viewers if we go by these one by one. So let's start with government bonds first. Where does that fall in our teeter-totter?
Well, today government bonds are way over, they're way over on the left. They're insured, so the whole U.S. government would have to fail in order for somebody to lose money on a government bond if they hold it to maturity.
Okay.
The problem, though, with today's yields is that government bonds don't pay much. In fact, if you were to buy a 10-year government bond today, you'd actually be getting a lot less than 2%, about 1.75%. Now think about that. You're going to tie your money up for 10 years, you're going to make 1.75%. That's not very attractive. So in the real world, government bonds are probably one of the least popular on that entire teeter-totter because of all the manipulation the Federal Reserve and other governments have done to artificially maneuver interest rates downward.
Okay, now how does that compare with municipal bonds? Are those only for people in a high tax bracket? Are they a little bit more stable?
Municipal bonds are generally considered to be for people in a high tax bracket because their claim to fame is that the interest from these municipal bonds is generally tax-free, income tax-free, federally. Now, if you happen to buy a municipal bond from the state and town in which you live, then it's also state tax-free. So you can get double, triple tax-exempt bonds or tax-exempt bonds that are just exempt federally. And the reason this makes sense is because, let's say somebody's in the 40% tax bracket, which is, the higher tax bracket. Now, if they're getting 3% tax-free, it's really the pre-tax equivalent of getting 5%.
Right.
And let's face it, although municipalities have been known to occasionally default on debt, most of the time they don't. So they're considered to be pretty secure.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about annuities because I find them to be super confusing.
As does everyone, that's right. Well, if you find those to be confusing, that just means one thing. You know what that is?
Stay clear of it.
No, that means you're normal. That means you're normal.
Oh, good.
Everyone, same thing. Everyone finds them to be confusing. And the reason is because how you define annuity depends upon what you're talking about. If you're talking to an insurance agent, a lot of times an annuity means just a lifetime income, like a pension. The old style pension plans where you get a lifetime income stream and you can never outlive it, but when you died, the insurance company kept the money.
Right.
That's called an immediate annuity. If you're talking to an investment broker or somebody whose business model is based on mutual funds or stocks, then they're probably going to be talking about a variable annuity. And variable annuities are okay, but the point is they have very high fees and they have investment risk. So I find that most of the time variable annuities are not the most suitable investment for somebody who's part of the income generation, who's retired or about to retire. And also, a lot of these things oftentimes have fees that are in the range of 2 or even 3% or more that are built in, that are hidden inside the variable annuity.
Okay.
And that's an example of why annuities oftentimes get a bad reputation. In this case, if we're talking about annuities, we're talking about secure annuities that protect principal but don't have any risk of loss. And that's different from the two that I've already described.
And once again, that's why you either need to be very diligent or have a very good advisor to help you kind of navigate this whole thing.
That's right. So oftentimes I say, you know, unless you've had training and you've researched and purchased individual government bonds, individual municipals, individual corporates, all the other stuff we talked about, unless you've done that, then you probably don't want to try it at home alone.
Okay. Let's go back to bonds. Our last form of bonds, corporate bonds. Where does that fall on our teeter-totter?
Well, corporate bonds are in the middle. Because as you know, corporations can default on debt, whereas the government cannot.
Okay.
So corporate bonds have a little bit more risk. The problem is the risk in corporate bonds is all across the board. Like, you know, if you go to get a mortgage, you have a FICO score, a credit score.
Right.
And the higher your credit is, the lower interest rate you have to pay.
Correct.
The lower your credit rating, then the more interest you have to pay.
Because you're more of a risk.
That's right. And eventually you may get a credit rating so low that they just won't even lend you the money in the first place.
Sure.
So when you're looking at corporate bonds, one of the most important things you have to look at is their credit rating. Moody's and Standard & Poor's are the two most common credit rating agencies that actually rank and evaluate the credit worthiness of the issuer, much like the FICO score with people who are looking for mortgages. But you also have to look beyond that. You have to look at maturity dates. Are you getting the right maturity date for your goals? You have to look at, is that bond callable or non-callable? Is it convertible or non-convertible?
Okay.
So in some ways, those are the epitome of my warning, you know, to be careful, don't try this at home.
So one of the other corporate things would be preferred stock in a corporation. How does that fall in this whole spectrum?
Preferred stock are one of the most misunderstood things, in some ways kind of like annuities.
Okay.
Because it's called a stock, so people think, oh, this is a stock. And technically it is a stock. In fact, on many brokerage statements, it's listed as a stock, not a bond. But in the real world, it's really a hybrid between a stock and a bond. And it has many more bond-like characteristics than it does stock-like characteristics.
It's kind of like VIP stock, sort of?
Kind of like VIP stock. It's probably a good way to, I hadn't thought about it that way. It's a good way to put it. And the reason preferreds are more bond-like than stock-like is simple. First of all, they pay a fixed interest rate that they call a dividend. That interest rate is stated, that dividend rate is stated right on the preferred certificate. Second of all, preferreds have a face value or par value, about which the price tends to stay sticky. It tends to go up a little bit or down a little bit, but usually the moves are not that radical, much like corporate bonds. Thirdly, preferreds actually fluctuate more with the bond market, not so much with the stock market. So why are they considered stocks at all then? Well, they're considered stocks for one important reason. They typically don't mature. We said earlier in the show that the nice thing about bonds is even if they fall out of favor, the investor can determine whether or not he or she wants to sell them at a loss or hold them to maturity and get the full face value back. With the preferreds, you don't have that opportunity because they go on forever. The good news, though, is compared to a similarly rated corporate bond, for example, you're probably getting a couple extra percentage points of return. And the idea is for that to compensate you for that extra risk.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time for today, but really quickly, can we touch on REITs?
Absolutely. You know, a REIT is the riskiest thing on here. In fact, in some ways, I'm taking literary license by putting it on here because a REIT is really the stock of a company that owns rental property. And usually these sources of rental property are corporate buildings, either office buildings or industrial or retail shopping malls or even nursing homes. And the net rental income after they pay their property taxes and insurance flows out to you as an investor in the form of a dividend. But again, they're the riskiest because unlike all the other things we mentioned, the interest rate or dividend isn't set. It can fluctuate like a common stock. And the price of these will be more volatile than any of the other things we've talked about today. So again, I put that on there with a little literary license. People have to be cautious.
Okay. Well, I know as always you have some final thoughts for today, so we will get back to that after the break.
The closing numbers on the markets today, at one point the market fell as if down a well, over 700 points.
Apple shares are just getting hammered this morning.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Finally, there is an alternative. Read David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Discover practical solutions to the financial challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. Learn the truth about Wall Street, the financial media, and the secrets they try to hide from everyday investors. This isn't just another book about investing. Working Americans who have lived through 2 major stock market crashes and the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression in the past 16 years don't need another book about investing. David Scranton's approach to financial planning is a holistic system designed for maximum protection, strategic growth, and reliable income regardless of market conditions. Stop planning for retirement with your fingers crossed. Plan with confidence, knowledge, and peace of mind. Read Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Available now.
If I suggested to you to picture the word fearlessness, one image that might first come to mind is that of an astronaut strapped in the seat of a rocket during countdown. That would be an accurate image because an astronaut's fearlessness in that situation doesn't come from nowhere. He's learned it with years and years of intensive training and preparation. He's not ignoring the tremendous risks involved in what he's doing. Instead, he has faced those risks head-on and done everything in his power to lower them. He's taken a strategic approach to reducing risk and achieving success. And knowing that he's done that is what allows him to sit in that seat and blast off toward the stars fearlessly. Now, obviously, entering retirement may not be exactly the same as riding a rocket, but it is blasting off in a way. You're leaving one phase of your life behind and heading into another. The phase you're leaving is the one in which you had a job that provided you with steady income to meet your financial needs. Knowing that can be comforting and, of course, reassuring. Realizing that you'll now have to depend on your savings and Social Security to meet those needs can certainly be a very scary prospect. But the point I hope that you've taken away from today's show is that it doesn't have to be that scary. You can embrace and enjoy retirement fearlessly. But like the astronaut, you have to earn the ability by taking the right steps. It doesn't just come for free. Step 1 lies in identifying your purpose-based retirement goals and realizing that just as you're leaving your job behind, you should also leave behind that 401k mindset that you've applied toward saving throughout most of your working career. That's the mindset, again, where you focused on the lump sum value of your investments and whether the lump sum was up or down. In my experience, strategies focused mainly on growth and capital gains are not only largely unnecessary as you near retirement, but they're also potentially reckless, especially in today's unstable stock market. They offer too little control and are filled with far too many unknowns, which create a perfect recipe for fear and worry. The next step lies in looking inward to determine whether you possess the necessary core values to get you to fearlessness. These are the values, of course, outlined in my book, Return on Principle, coming out this summer. In addition to fearlessness, those core values include overprotection, honesty, diligence, detail orientation, coachability, and leadership. If you don't have these, by being brutally honest with yourself, then the final important step is determining whether or not your financial advisor has these qualities. In the end, I truly believe the key to fearlessness lies in focusing on strategies designed to provide reliable and steady income through interest and dividends, as well as protection from damaging losses and reasonable returns through strategic reinvestment. That's the approach that incorporates all my core values and leads you toward a fearless retirement. Now, before we go, I want to thank all of our regular viewers as well as those of you that are watching for the first time. I hope to see you back here. For more information on today's topic and much more, I encourage you to download a copy of my new report entitled Renewable Retirement Resources, the Case for Fixed Income. And you can do this online right after the show. You can find it at theincomegeneration.com. You can also download a report called The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and thanks again for watching.